Good morning and welcome to Let's Coach 2023. I'm Lani Kim, and I am one of the coaches here on the Life Coach University campus. So welcome if this is your first time. If you've been here before, welcome back. We're so glad to have you again. Today, I am going to share about self-worth. It's such a near and dear topic to me because in my growing up, self-worth was attached to so many circumstances, things that are happening in my life. And as we know, circumstances change throughout life. So what I would experience is a constant fluctuation in my self-worth, at least what I interpreted as my self-worth. And that was my reality, right? If that's what I'm thinking, that is the reality I'm experiencing. So regardless of what the truth of that is, or how someone else might have seen me, my reality is what I experienced. So I had this constantly shifting experience of self-worth, and it was quite a roller coaster ride because that's life, right? We have our highs and our lows. And so when life was great, I had a wonderful sense of self-worth. But when life wasn't going great, I had a really low sense of self-worth. And a lot of it, or not a lot of it, but a great deal of time was and it wasn't daily, it wasn't weekly, it wasn't monthly. Some of these underlying emotions went on for years, especially of low self-worth. For instance, when my parents were going through a divorce, I took that very, very personally, and it affected the way that I had my outside relationships. It was something that I personally felt was embarrassing and maybe shameful. Yeah, there was an element of shame under that attached, and I attached that to myself. And mind you, I was probably around 10 years old. And that is the natural inclination of a child, is to take things personally, because you are trying to survive and you want to think the best of your parents, obviously, because they're caring for you. Your life is in their hands. And what happens then is you internalize a lot of that and put it on yourself. And so that was something I carried with myself for many, many years. I want to say probably decades. So that came to be a foundational actually issue for me and a lot of the relationships I had. And friendships, romantic relationships, I really took so much of that with me. And this week has been an interesting experience of understanding how to separate your self-worth from your circumstances. So I wanted to share that because there's times in life where we forget how easy that is to do. And I thought, I really want to share this with all of you because I know there's someone or several of you who are going through the same thing. And I want to encourage you and give you some tools so that you are not taking your external circumstances and making them personal. Okay? Your circumstances are not you. Your circumstances are circumstances, and you happen to be nearby them or you happen to be maybe a player in what is going on. You are affected by it, but your circumstances are not you. And they do not determine your self-worth. So I'm going to share a little bit about my experience this week, just in the past couple of days. So we had a business issue, and we were hosting someone, and we couldn't host them because we had an issue at the place. And it was very last minute, within 2 hours of their official arrival. So we had to scramble at the last minute to find them different accommodations. And we found one night at a wonderful accommodation through a person I know. And that transition went fairly well. It was still a lot of things had to be changed around, but in the end, the people were very happy. And then we needed to find something else for them for the remainder of their time. That did not go well. It was not definitely as expected by our guests nor us. And it was very stressful considering what had already happened to them, and now this. And the question that popped up in my head is, what did I do wrong? I must have done something wrong here. Because the emotion that I was feeling was frustration, definitely, but a lot of shame. And the way that my brain interpreted that is it was definitely something I did. It had nothing to do with the circumstance. The circumstance was not to blame, but myself personally, right? There has to be someone at fault for this, right? And so it must be me. And that is a very dangerous place to be. Because number one, the mindset that it puts you in is not the mindset of a solver, a solution maker. It puts you into a victim mentality, and it doesn't bring out your best thinking. And often you'll go to blame other people. So this doesn't work for you as an individual, and it doesn't help you build character. And also, if you act upon those thoughts, those around you who are trying to support you and help you are most likely the ones you're going to lash out at. And that is definitely not what you want to do. You want to treat your support system as your support system. You want to cherish and be grateful for them, not lash out at them, right? So I was thinking this through, and what was just so helpful is talking out loud. I was sharing with my husband. I said, this is so interesting. I said, I don't know how I would have handled this even maybe 5 years ago, but I am so conscious of my thoughts, the things that I'm telling myself, and the reaction I'm having to those thoughts. Just in my head, I haven't said anything aloud yet, right? But if I don't capture my own thoughts and I don't examine them myself, and I don't realize that these are just one of many thoughts I'm having right now. I just happen to be focusing on some negative thoughts, right? There's other thoughts going on in my head, lots of other thoughts that I could easily capture and focus on. But these are the ones that my brain is focusing on right now. And I'm wondering why, right? And what is the response that I'm having is more of a reaction to those thoughts. Not very good, not very helpful. But I know that I'm not obligated to say those things. I'm not obligated to keep thinking those things. I'm not obligated to believe those things. So I just talked this out loud to my husband, and that was helpful of in itself to bring outside my thoughts, to bring them out externally from inside of me, to kind of listen to my dialogue and think, okay, what would I say to a client who was saying these things, right? Or even a friend or a family member who's saying these things to me. What would my response be? Because then I can come from a loving, objective point of view. I don't feel beholden to these thoughts anymore. And as I talked them through, I thought, I'm really pairing this situation and making it about myself. And I'm internalizing all of this. Because quite frankly, that's the easy thing for our brains to do, is to become the victim, to stay stuck, to not take action, because there's no risk with that. We just stay where we are, thinking these thoughts, and there's a part of our brain that is telling us, well, this is safe. You're safe here. We know what's going to happen. But if you take action and you try to change things, we don't know what's going to happen, right? What if I do something and someone has a reaction to that that's negative? That'll lower our self-worth even more. We don't want to risk that. So I was able to change the direction of my thoughts, but it did take work, and it did take acknowledging what I was actually feeling at that moment, the thoughts that were going through my head. Where is this all coming from, right? And I understood that that would lead to some very, very unhelpful behavior, because I could hear the thoughts of blame on other people. And I could hear the excuses start to well up within me. And the funny thing about putting the blame on someone else is that it made me internalize what had happened even more and tie it to myself even more. Because really it came from my brain telling me there is no control over this. But yes, there is. There's a control I have over what thoughts that I'm choosing to believe, what thoughts that I'm holding on to, and what thoughts that I'm releasing, and how I conduct myself. So I want to ask you, what are you going through right now that you may be tying your self-worth to, and that is affecting you negatively? But I want to say even positively, because chances are, if you are tying your self-worth to your external circumstances, even if you're feeling great right now, those circumstances are going to change. And when you're not feeling so great, your self-worth is going to plummet And that you're going to end up taking that personally, that negative or that circumstance, and tying it to your self-worth. So even if you're feeling great, if you take your self-worth from your external circumstances, and even if you're feeling great right now, I want to encourage you to start to examine your thoughts on that. So the question becomes, how do we change our processing of our self-worth? Okay. Well, it's an internal examination into ourselves. It's an acknowledgement of ourselves. It's a celebration of ourselves. And these are things that we aren't usually taught to do. It certainly isn't in our school curriculum, right? We go to school for all these years, and there isn't a space of what are your coping mechanisms? How do you look at your self-worth? So give yourself a break if you feel like, wow, I should know this stuff. Not if you've never been taught it, which is why I'm so excited that you're here. So it's just as simple as thinking about a piece of paper or even your phone. I'm a journaler. I like pen to paper, so that's always my go-to preference. But even in your phone is to list out your qualities. And I don't even mean they need to be boastful. They can be simple qualities. Doesn't have to be, I am the best, I am the fastest, I'm the smartest, but simple qualities. And knowing where your sense of self-worth comes from is so important. Now, there's places we may think it's coming from, like in our ideal world, but really, where is it coming from? So I definitely know that the voice of one of my parents is very strong in my head. That's where my default thinking goes to. The interactions I have or had with this parent and have, I mean, I still have them, but it's all rooted in what I grew up with and with that particular parent. And so I have become familiar with the dialogue when it starts to default to thinking what was instilled in me by that parent. Now I can recognize it and be aware of it. Like, oh, this is what I was conditioned to think in my childhood. So it's become my default. But that doesn't mean I need to think that. And now I have my own thoughts, my own sentences that I've written down, I've practiced by telling myself. And I have that. So if you're familiar at all with standards, if you have ever watched the TV show The Simpsons, in the beginning of the opening credits, you'll see Bart Simpson writing on the chalkboard. So this character is writing on a chalkboard these sentences. It changes with the different episodes, but it's the same thing, is that he's standing in a classroom. Clearly, he's been naughty and he isn't allowed to either go out to play or he's missing out on something. He's in the classroom by himself and he's writing what at least here in the States, we call standards. And he's writing a sentence that's reflecting some of his behavior and he's writing it over and over again. So something like, I will not lie anymore. I will tell the truth. Sentences like these, writing them over and over again. And I know that if you have ever experienced this, it has a negative connotation. So there may be a little bit resistance to this practice, but I want to encourage you to flip that 180 and think of how powerful that is, though, right? You really remember that exercise and you probably remember the sentences you had to write. Well, what if you could change it to something helpful and something positive in your life? And just think how impactful that would be, right? And so it is journaling these sentences out every morning. And I give myself minimum 30 days is writing that sentence just once for 30 days. Doesn't take long. Now, there's a lot of other techniques, and you can definitely go deeper into this. But step one is it needs to become something you purposefully think, not something that comes to you in the moment, because in the moment, you're going to go into your default thinking, and that is what we're trying to change. So you don't want to be in your default thinking. You want to create new thinking. So this has to be done when your brain isn't reacting. So think of this as a sport, right? For instance, maybe I think of boxing, right? So boxing is a sport where you have reactions and responses, right? I mean, this is life, but it's kind of a micro experimentation. And so when you're boxing, right, you want to have responses, meaning when someone punches or jabs, you want to know so well that you don't even have to think how to respond to that, right? Because very often, if you don't practice these things ahead of time, when you get into the ring, the way your brain is to react in a way that actually doesn't protect your body for the long term, right? You may temporarily protect it, right? But then that might leave a vulnerable spot that is going to be attacked again. So when you are practicing all of this, it's because you want to start practicing this so that it becomes an ingrained response that therefore becomes a healthy reaction to something. Because a reaction is the process that we go through, the actions that we take when it kind of bypasses our brain, our prefrontal cortex, right? Our logical sense of our brain. It just comes out, right? Because our logical brain needs time. And when we're reacting, there is no time. So we want to condition ourselves so well that that becomes our reaction rather than how we've been reacting in the past. So I want to encourage you to just start with writing the sentence out, right? So one of the sentences I've been practicing lately is, I love my life. I love my life. And practicing it, at first it was Like, okay, I love my life, you know? But as I practice it more and more, there's all these things that come to me because when I say I love my life, my brain actually wants to go the next step and be like, okay, what do we love about your life? And start to fill in the answer, or not the answer, but continue that stream of thought. And doing it for so long, I am on day 62, I think. It has come up so often that now when I feel that little bit of like room spinning, when you're feeling that momentary overwhelm, sometimes like, what is going on? Like I felt this week. And I say, oh, my reactive sentence is, I love my life. And I've done it enough times that my brain starts to fill in all these things. And it doesn't change my circumstance, but emotionally, I am not so focused on that moment because I see my life is way outside of that moment or those moments. It's my life is my life. Everything that's happened, it's not this micro moment. And it puts me in a completely different mindset. So that is my tool for you today and my encouragement to you today. Thank you so much for being here and joining me for Let's Coach 2023. I will see you next week. Take care.